Well, Bugaloos Mania continues here on WFDU FM. John McIndoe, who played the part of IQ on the Bugaloos, joins us tonight. Very thrilled to have him on. And, it was only a couple of weeks ago that we talked to Caroline Ellis, who played Joy on the show. And in talking with her, Caroline told me that you had a circus background. What exactly did you do in the circus?
Yeah, well, actually, my grandfather had a traveling circus that went throughout Europe. I was really small at the time, but I used to watch for Granddad. He was a famous clown called Joey the Clown.
Oh, okay.
Well, he was more of an inventor, an innovative guy. He was pretty trippy Granddad to have.
But at some point, your interest must have shifted to music.
Yeah, it did, actually. The Beatles came along, and it's really crazy because I moved to London when I was about 14, 15. I went to London, and the first job I got was with a publicist, Brian Somerville, who was the Beatles publicist.
Oh, wow.
So when I was working for Brian, I was a fax machine.
Oh, I see.
In them days it was take it by hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, take this over to EMI Studios or take this to this publisher. And so I was like a courier.
Right. Well, that must have been an incredible time because it's the height of swinging London. I mean, you're hanging out with rock royalty. And as I understand, you became pretty friendly with George Harrison.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'd go down to the house in Asia.
Mm-hmm.
And my best buddy, a good friend of mine, Perry Press at the time, he was looking for another house for George.
Right.
There was a priory. He bought the priory from Perry. So we'd go down there quite a few times and hang out and watch telly. He was a good guy.
Yeah.
So anyway, I worked for Brian for quite a while. And then I kind of hung out at one club called the Marquee in London. I made a lot of friends and other musicians and tried out in a few bands. I actually got good friends with a band that was number one at the time. There was a love affair. They had their number one single in England called Everlasting Love.
Open up your eyes, then you realize, here I stand with my everlasting love. Need you by my side, girl, to be my bride. You'll never be denied everlasting love from the very start.
So I kind of went on the road with him as an assistant. Then I became great pals with the keyboard player Linton Guest, and we wrote songs together and went in other bands together, And when Apple opened, they sent me over to Apple. George Harrison's putting bands together. He'd done like the Grapefruit and the Marmalade and that. So I kind of got a temporary job with the Beatles company, and I became really good pals with George's personal assistant, Terry Doran.
Right, sure.
And Terry said, hey, John, over at EMI House, which was EMI Records, they said they're doing an audition for another band like the Monkees.
Ah.
There's two guys came over from the United States. He said, why don't you get yourself over there, and give it a shot? I said, okay, thanks, Terry. Shall I take a guitar or something? So they gave me one of George's guitars that was there. George Harrison.
Yeah.
So I went over to the audition with Mr. Harrison's guitar, played a couple of songs, and I was put in a room with 3 or 4 other guys. This is mind-blowing. One was Phil Collins. The other one was Elton John, who became Elton John's manager.
Right.
And I guess it was the end of the audition, because I came in at the very end. And they wanted to pick a guy to play IQ, so it was between me, Phil Collins, and Elton John's manager. And he became, he's pretty famous now in England. He runs like Warner Brothers, Time Life over there. Can't remember his name. Strange. Okay. So anyway, we're sitting in there, and they said, okay, we'll get back to you. So that was that. I thought, oh, well, that's it. I'll take the guitar back to Terry. So I went back to Apple. That's when we were on Baker Street, the very first when they opened.
Right.
Dropped off the guitar And all my friends at night, we used to go to all these different clubs, musician clubs. There was the Marquee, Ronnie Scott's, and the Tramps. So I went down there with my pals. As soon as we got in, I can Sid Croft and Mick Jagger.
Oh, okay.
Sitting in the restaurant. So anyway, I thought, well, that's strange. Anyway, I didn't think anything of it. The next day, I got a call to come back to TMRS. He said, you got the job as IQ Bugaloos. Whoa. After years went by, I said, hey, Sid, I saw you in the club with Mick Jagger. He said, yeah, I was showing him the pictures of you, Phil Collins, and the other guy, I can't remember his name. And he said, Mick said, oh, him. He looks like one of the lads. So I thank you, Mr. Mick Jagger, sir.
Yeah.
You got me the job.
And poor Phil Collins lost out on the job.
He lost out, but boy, he sure took off.
Yeah, that's true.
He took off and done really well.
So you get to America, and as I understand it, the Crofts basically put you in a big mansion.
Yeah, they put us up in a house on Calcaham Drive, right next to the Greek Theater. So on our back window, we could see all the concerts for free at night.
Oh, wow.
So it was kind of overwhelming, to go from a little dinky apartment in London to a big mansion.
Yeah, I can imagine. So the Crofts put you and Wayne and Little John and Caroline up in this mansion as you start work on the series. And you mentioned the Monkees comparison earlier, and as I understand it, a monkey came by to visit the Bugaloos.
A good friend of mine from London was Davy Jones.
Oh, wow, okay.
I knew Davy before the Monkees. So Davy came by and hung out for quite a while, and showed us around, and he showed Caroline, and he took us out to, at that time he had a boutique in West Hollywood. No, I'm sorry, in Brentwood. So Davy was a good pal, and he'd come by. And then some other friends would visit, but through the Crofts we got to meet all the real old stars. We were Howard Keel, Debbie Reynolds, and Martha Ray, of course, and Billy Barty.
Oh, what was it like to work with him?
Oh, what a great guy.
Yeah?
We loved Billy. I used to see him all the time after we finished, and I was working in the factory with the Crofts. His place was just down the road, so I'd pop in and say hi. He was a great guy.
Well, he's a Hollywood...
Fun little guy, real nice guy.
And a Hollywood legend, really, at that point. He'd been in everything. Yeah. And Martha Ray?
Well, you know what? I really hit it off with Martha Ray. She's a really, really nice lady. She took us to her house, and the first day we met her, she invited us for dinner in her house, so we all went there. And I'm walking around looking at all these pictures of clowns. I said, oh, you like clowns? She said, yeah. I said, oh, well, my granddad was a clown, and then that was it. We hit it off. So she was like a buddy.
I'm thinking about your experience in music up to that point, and clearly the music of the Bugaloos was going to be very different than, the Apple roster.
Yep.
Was it a shock for you?
Well, it was, because right then we were getting into, like, John Lee Hooker and Muddy Waters,
right,
and putting a commercial twist on it, like British-style rock. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But to walk into a controlled environment where it's like, you can't ad-lib, you can't do this, you got to do this, and this. That was a little bit strange, actually.
Yeah, I would
think. Because I was used to just letting go. And we had Hal Yogler at the time, who was our music producer, and he wrote some of the songs, so we had to follow him strictly. I wanted to, quite truthfully, go back at night and just lock myself and write songs for the Bugaloos that I thought they should have been singing.
Right. But I will say, they're great songs, and for that project, they were just perfect, and those songs still resonate today. Yeah.
We were for the younger kids, and they've done a great job.
And I would, when I listen to those Bugaloos tracks, what I'm hearing is, maybe you can help me out here. I'm hearing what sounds like two guys doubled on lead vocals.
Yeah. Now, Little John has a very low voice. And I can do harmonies. I'm used to all different kind of harmonies. So I was at middle high.
Okay.
And they were playing around with the bottom. you know,
Right.
between Wayne and John and myself. Sometimes I could, you know, but mostly all the high ones you'll hear was me.
Right,
Middle
right.
and high.
And, of course, Caroline's in there, you know. To
And
supply
Caroline,
that-
of course.
Yeah,
I
sure.
mean, she was the front man, the front girl.
She was the Davy Jones of the Bugaloos,
Yeah,
if you will.
she was a
Sure.
Davy, yeah.
Can it be? Is it real? Well, it's new to you, but I've been loving you. Yes, new to you, but I've been loving you. Well, it's new to you, but I've been loving you.
We're talking to John McIndoe of the Bugaloos, who played the part of IQ, and I have to ask you what you thought of your costume the very first time you saw it.
I thought, wow, I'm going to fly. You'd be hanging 20 feet in the air, waiting for a take. All right, straighten up. Okay.
And what about stepping onto the set of Tranquility Forest for the first time?
The first day walking on the set, I thought, oh, wow.
Right.
Am I in San Francisco? But, I mean, it was very colorful, and it was a trip. Another interesting thing, actually, the stage we were on, stage 26, and we were right next door to Lucille Ball, who was still filming at the time.
Ah,
So on our break, we'd go and watch Lucille.
right. Well,
She was just so in command. She was such a pro. And it's so funny, at the very back of the Tranquility Forest set,
right.
they had all the Star Trek sets all packed in the back.
Oh, wow.
You know, and it wasn't a big telly watcher in them days, but it wasn't until after the fact I said to little John, I said, you know, little John, you know when we used to go behind the sets and just kick back? We were on the bridge of the Enterprise.
If only you had pocketed some of those props, you.
Oh, I'd be rich.
Oh, you could sell them on eBay.
Yeah,
like
it was all there. They were all packed up against the wall, you know, but you could identify what they were. And they said, yeah, that's the stage you shot Star Trek in.
So the show caught on, and you guys went out on a promotional tour, and you got to meet your fans. What was that like?
It was so fresh and new to us. It was just, I can't explain it. You fell in love with your fans.
Yeah.
To see their admiration, the little eyes wide open, you just bent over backwards to please them.
Did you feel at any time a sense of responsibility to those fans?
Yeah, you did. You had to be that character for them. We'd go to like Macy's and somewhere in Texas, a big department store in Texas. It was full of kids. And, you know, we had some girls that liked the boys, but all the little boys were queued up to get Caroline's autograph. Well, she's such a sweetie, you know.
Yeah.
Always smiling, always beautiful to see, you know.
Sure.
See, the nice thing about the Bugaloos is we all became friends.
Right.
And that happened real fast. You know, we were kept under a bubble, so we were that little unit all the time. So I don't think once, I can't even think there was any kind of argument or anything like that.
No.
Nope.
And I would think that you probably had maybe the most in common with Little John because
Yeah,
he was a
good little
musician.
drummer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and John went on to, he had a band that was playing, and I think he retired in France now.
Yeah. Well, that inevitably leads us to this conversation. I mean, the show got canceled, but in a way it just doesn't seem to make any sense because it was a super popular show and it was doing well, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, when the show stopped running and we were hanging around waiting, we'd spend our time up at Capitol Records sometimes. We'd go up there and the guys would say, God, you guys are getting sacks of mail.
Right.
And they showed us in the mail room, like, 3 big sacks full of mail. We pulled a couple out to answer.
Right.
Then a month went by, almost, and it was like, okay, we're going to send you home to wait. And so I thought, oh, okay. But I found out when I came back to the U.S. it was kind of a political thing.
Yeah, I talked with Caroline about this. You know, the Crofts had sent you home for Christmas vacation, and you were waiting around for word about the series, and then all these sort of machinations behind the scenes happened, and that was the end of it, and everybody went on to different things, and she had said that you got back into music?
Well, actually, what I done, when we went back, I hooked up again with my good friend Linton.
Right.
He was a producer at Pi Records at the time in London, and he was putting a band together. So he said, "Come on, join my band, the Washington Flyers." I said, "Okay." And we played television and done a lot of songwriting together.
You know, I just want to go back to Pi Records for a second because I think the biggest act on Pi, if I'm not mistaken, was, the Kinks, I would think.
Yeah, and they had the Kinks, and then they had Linda Kendricks, and we had a lot of hit songs like Kung Fu Fighting.
Oh, sure, okay.
In a Little Instant. Yeah, we done that, and I was working actually with Linton, and we actually went on the road and promoted Kung Fu Fighting. Then we do stuff ourselves, we done another Saturday morning.
Yeah.
On Dawn. That was our label, Dawn.
Right.
The Washington Flyers were mainly my friend Linton and Jimmy Edwards, who was the lead singer.
Right.
And they were hired as producers for Dawn Records, which was a subsidiary label of Pi.
Right.
And we were all good pals from the past, so he says, "Come on, John, we'll put this band together and take it on the road." And sure enough, we done Top of the Pops, which was an English TV show.
Sure.
And a couple of places. And then went back to London because we had, a lot of other things going on. So it was like a fun project for us.
Gotcha! Hit it, Sam! Another Saturday morning.
That's John McIndoe's other band, the Washington Flyers, right here on WFDU FM with another Saturday morning. Great, great single.
And I never mentioned this. Everybody in that band became successful. Our drummer was Steve Hawley.
Sure, joined Wings, yeah.
Yeah, Steve went with Wings and with Julian Lennon. And I know he's still doing it in New York somewhere. Our lead guitar player was a gentleman called Jeff Lane. Well, his real name's Jeff Lane. Is Nicolas Cage's partner in Saturn Films.
Oh, wow.
And he went on to produce quite a lot of films.
So I'm trying to get the timeline right here. You're working with the Washington Flyers, and then eventually you decide to actually come back to America. Why'd you decide to come back?
Well, I kind of liked it, that lovely weather. It was a miserable rainy day in London. I thought, I'm going back. And a good friend of mine, Charlie Harrison, who was the bass player for Poco over here,
right,
the band Poco, me and Charlie went over. I said, "Come on, Charlie, come back with us and we'll see." So Charlie came back over with me back to L.A. We got an apartment there for a while, and Charlie, he loved that American country music, so he was looking for a band. He's a bass player. So, and I thought, okay, see if we can carry this acting on. So I went around a lot of the agents in Hollywood looking for an agent.
Right.
Everybody give me a nice, the show was canceled. And I thought, oh, boy, things are a bit gloomy here. So about a couple of weeks after that, I went over to St. Marty's, and they let me work in their showbiz factory.
Oh, okay.
So I worked in the factory on the new shows that were developing. We were making props and puppets for the Las Vegas show, and that kind of reminded me a bit of the circus days in a way. So they were gracious enough to employ me, So I'd done that for a while. I had to go back to Scotland. My mom died.
Ah.
And I was there for a while, went back up to London, and I got into some acting there. We've done some TV commercials for Sweat.
Right.
And a film about Jesus' Last Supper. I was Peter.
Ah,
I played Peter, yes. A few other things were going on at the time, but I got hungry to get back to L.A., so I jumped on the plane and went back home. This is where I've been, and I've stayed ever since.
Yeah, and you also wound up working for a Beatle again, back with George Harrison.
Yeah, when I came back to the States, about 3 or 4 years went by, and I hooked up with my friend Terry Doran.
Right.
And he said, yeah, George is he was living in the canyon, Benedict Canyon, I think it was at the time. And he said that we're opening a studio in Coanga, called Rats. I said, what's that? He said, rehearsal and tape studio. I went, oh, that's neat. And he said, you want to help us out? I said, sure. So I hung out there, and I helped him put the studio together. the very first client they had in there was Fleetwood Mac.
Oh, okay.
And they were auditioning at Lindsey Buckingham and
and Stevie Nicks.
Stevie Nicks, yeah.
Yeah.
They were kind of blending them into their sound. The old Fleetwood Mac.
Sure, the Peter Green
sound
Fleetwood Mac. Yeah.
So every day we listened to them rehearsing in there, and we heard the Fleetwood Mac develop that great sound.
Wow. Well, I also know that a few years ago you got involved with doing puppets and like children's television, right?
I got kind of creative and I invented all these characters. So we built all these puppets and we put it on the local public broadcasting station in L.A. So we had all these strange shows. We done a Halloween special with all puppets, and it was musical too. Then we done this Michael Ray. I can't remember what show he was on, but he had a show, and so we created this little dog character for him to be sidekick.
Right.
It was Scotty. So I was doing that for a while, and that was a lot of fun. I was actually doing what the Crofts were doing.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounded like some of the Crofts had kind of rubbed off on you there.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
And it was fun doing it. You know, I should have got more serious with it because a lot of people really loved the characters.
Right.
And I never thought of pursuing it commercially. Like, you know, it was just like it was a way to write music again.
Right, right.
It was, we'll write songs for these characters.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, you'd said that you have a studio, so I'm assuming that you continue to work on music at home.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. I still work with my friend Linton in London, and what we're doing is, this will be a documentary first, and a book, and eventually we hope a film. It's the story of the Von Neumann racing family, Competition Motors.
Okay.
This was Josie Von Neumann. She'd raced for Ferrari. In fact, her family introduced Ferrari and Porsche into the United States. And she used to go around racing her Ferrari and beating everybody. And she became really good friends with James Dean.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, well, her family sold the Porsche. They had Competition Motors. They sold the Porsche. He died in.
Right, right.
And he used to go with Josie to all the races. Now, my son's best friend is a gentleman called James Phelps, and he's the godson of James Dean.
Oh, okay.
And for years we've been trying to figure out how, there's such a great story here, how do we do it? So we got together with my good friend Linton, who's a great author.
Right.
And he's working on the book right now, and we're working on the documentary.
Wow, that sounds fascinating.
And hopefully it'll flip over to a major film because the story is absolutely fantastic.
I'm assuming that you'll also be doing some music for it.
Yeah, me and Lynn will do the soundtrack.
Right.
Always share with your friends.
Right, exactly.
If you need somebody to help you, just let out a sound and we'll be around again and again. We will fly the earth for a friend, 'cause we know the worth of a friend. And there's nothing.
We're talking to John McIndoe of The Bugaloos tonight on the show, and as we start to wrap up here, we talked about the show being canceled in, I guess, 1972, somewhere around there, but were you aware that it was constantly in reruns all throughout the late 70s and early 80s?
Yeah, after a while I did. When I was working at the factory, I guess they told me one time that it was picked up for syndication. I didn't really know what that meant. I went, oh, that's good. Then even Marty said a few times, because he would talk in the back of the factory sometimes when he was in the office, and he'd say, yeah, we should have kept it going. We should have just not listened to them and kept it going.
Well, he's right, because even though the lifespan of the show was cut short, it ran for such a long time.
Actually, it's still running in certain places because you get it on, on Bill's website. And thanks to Bill, people still know that we're around doing other stuff because he maintains our website, his website, The Bugaloos.
Yeah.
And it's a trip every so often. I visit it, and there's people from Taiwan and Australia and Canada, and, still watching the show.
Does it amaze you that the show continues to have that kind of impact?
Not really. I've watched young kids look at it, and they get pulled in the color
Right.
and the characters. I see why it's kind of stayed around, and it's clean. It's good, clean fun.
Something else I noticed, too, in watching it, I think that, the Crofts made a smart decision from switching to film to video.
Right.
It doesn't date quite as much on video. It always seems fresh, and also because it takes place in a kind of fantasy landscape, there's nothing about it that screams out to you the time period. I mean,
timeless.
Yeah,
Right
yeah.
on.
I had mentioned this to you before we had this conversation. My feeling that the Bugaloos feels like unfinished business.
Yeah.
In the sense that it just ended. It ended right
So
at the
abruptly, yeah.
Yeah, so abruptly.
And we were getting really tight. I was starting to write songs on the side that I saw as Bugaloo tracks.
Right.
And we were blending better, as far as the sound. And like maybe the last 4 or 5 episodes we shot was real fun. We were into it,
Right.
So it was like, it was sad.
Yeah. Because
it ended that way, yeah.
it's my secret goal to somehow corral the Bugaloos into recording one last song or one new song.
So cool. That'd be fun. But the Buggies, I'd be game.
Well, John, I want to thank you so much for coming on and spending some time with us. It's always interesting to talk to someone that as a child you were a fan of, and get to know them a little bit. And certainly all the guys I knew, myself included, all were madly in love with Joy. But the 3 male Bugaloos, well, you guys were kind of like older brothers, if you're a little kid watching the show.
Right.
You sort of identify and hope that one day you can be as cool as
right.
the other 3 Bugaloos.
Yeah.
And be in a band and hang around with a groovy chick. I mean, what's not to love,
What more could you ask for?
Exactly.
Take me back. All right, Dave. Really was a pleasure, mate. Thanks very much.
Oh,